Well, welcome to day 2. Hopefully you guys are enjoying yourself. This is a different format. We've had this format before, and I was telling them, some of the people here, that we used to have, a deathmatch contest in this type of format where I'd have like 4 or 5 vendors within the same category, and I would moderate it, and I'd ask them why a publisher should pick you versus someone else, than the next person next to them. And I had the audience vote in the back, like who was the winner. So these things became so vicious that we kind of adjusted the format to make it much more friendly. So this is a predictions panel, so it's very open. If you have a question, you can ask them. They'll ask each other some questions. I'll prompt some questions along the way, but it's designed to be very free-flowing. And if you have a question, like within the segment, just raise your hand and we'll take it and we'll go from there. And if you ask like, hey, what do you think of this vendor? Well, they'll give you a candid answer right back. Or what do you think KPIs are working, or whatever the case may be, or is this market trending, for you, or things of that nature. So the expectations are high. So with that, I'm going to introduce Carol Tran, who handles growth at Dolby Labs, and they're going to have a big initiative with an app, et cetera. And she's covered all the aspects of user acquisition all the way to retention engagement as well as monetization. Jeetan Yogi, who is the most personable guy in the industry, he's our chapter president for Canada and runs our MGS Canada, and he's the first inductee into the Mobile Growth Association Hall of Fame, which we inducted him yesterday. So very proud of that. Ewa Growler, who I have an interesting story because she called me out 7 years ago at our MGS Europe event, and completely not expecting it. I didn't know Eva at the time. Completely not expecting it, because I asked like, hey, we're doing closing comments. Is there any feedback? And she came up and said, yeah, why aren't there more women speakers there? And this is 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, this industry was 97% male. And because of that, we went back and actually, our board and management team went back and reprioritized that, because it wasn't a known issue for us, to be quite honest with you. And I said, well, I don't know any women. I don't know that many women in our industry, because there really wasn't. And I said, if you help us, we'll have more women speakers. So with her help, we've pioneered gender equity long before there was an Embolden or any of these women organizations out there. Embolden's a really good strategic partner for us. But we have 2 major milestones. One is the most women speakers in the history of mobile. The other one is a majority women speaking conference. And for those of you who don't know, MGS is actually a woman-run company. So the CEO and 90% of the people in the company are women. Thank you, nice. Eva. You changed the direction of our industry. So. Mary Yang, she's a director of product. She moved over from Shmuel over to LinkedIn, so she's very well versed on a lot of the product strategy that's evolving within the space. I told Mary I've hacked LinkedIn twice, and in fact they had to change the rules and some of the tech because of what I was doing with their platform, but no further comment. Des Gesgen, who I consider one of the luminaries within the space, one of the sharpest guys, and has worked at various companies from GSN to Machine Zone, et cetera, wealth of information. With that, I'm just gonna start with, going down the line, and we'll just ask, what are your top 3 predictions for 2020 that publishers should be looking out for? We'll start with Eva.
Yeah, so I'm basically, as you can see, coming a lot from the product side, but involve as well a lot of partnerships as well related to marketing. For me, it's what I'm really seeing or looking forward how the all new sources involve. Like we had some times ago, there's all discussion, Snapchat and so on, for one or another maybe work out, and App Store's advertising now as well. To be honest, didn't hear so many positive. I'm looking forward how the TikTok and the new social channels, if they're involved or not, and how. And I think that it's something to really see, because a lot of people or publishers are challenged with finding new sources next to Google and Facebook, which are owning everything. So that's definitely from the perspective of marketing, I would say. Except that the new verticals in terms of technology, like we all know, there is existing the Apple Watch and the all different Fitbit and other options, but I still don't see like really people jumping on it and trying it out. With now Google, buying the Fitbit and owning it, I think this part might involve as well the other possibilities to placement for the marketers. In common with technologies related to 5G and Viral, this will be as well topic which definitely involve a lot.
3 predictions, Mary, or some unique insight that you have that you feel the audience can benefit from.
Yeah, I'll go with 3. I'll follow the rules.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first one, I think trust and safety will continue to be a huge topic, not only in mobile internet, but broadly in different types of products. And with that, we have seen like more and more standards like getting clarified. And like more and more bigger companies starting to like following the rules and also establishing standards. And a lot of those big companies, they actually like own really huge app platforms. So that is of course also going to impact the downstream like folks who need to do user acquisition through those different channels. So this is going to become a more and more like interesting topic. And also people's awareness on trust and safety right now is at a completely different level. So there's going to be a new high standards in terms of these fields. The second one, I think, is there's going to be more focus on profitable growth for the majority of the companies with the trends that we're seeing in the global economy, with like the other like revenue losses that people kind of lose because of like these trust and safety, like regulation, all of these. So people will go back to focus more on profitable growth. So there could be a reduction or at least reduction of growth in terms of the overall like marketing dollars spent in the industry. And also there might be a shift because again, of the data regulation in these like different marketing channels, online marketing channels, that there will be a more diverse marketing channels, like back a little bit more into the traditional media, together with the carriers like these bundling and sponsorship that we may see actually a little bit more. And the third one, I think, is kind of a reason because of all of these, companies will look also for quality growth, meaning that it's not only growing the top of the funnel, but it's really the customer satisfaction, the retention of the users, both for the unpaid users who may build a community for you and create these network effect, and also the retention for potentially subscription or paying customers. So these are the trends that I think will happen in this year.
Good stuff. So a couple of things from my side. I think one thing, and not just predictions, but things I'm seeing, and probably people will start focusing more on these things. We see 2 things in marketing, performance marketing, very measurable. And then there's brand marketing, not so measurable, but you still need to do some. So a lot of people like the CMO suite or marketing people will focus a lot more on performance marketing than they're doing today. And we do a lot. I mean, 95%, right? Because we are all in the mobile space. It's very measurable, attributable. But a lot of the Cokes, Nikes, Gaps of the world, I know, are hiring people that have excelled in performance marketing. So there's certainly going to be a huge shift in a lot of these people. And some of the older marketing functions like PR and brand recognition and things like that, in my opinion, will be a little bit devalued. And a lot of these guys, I mean, and the example is that, a lot of these guys have built brands just by doing performance marketing and become household names like, Slack and Tinder. And these guys have now started doing some events or brand marketing, as we know, but these have all built huge brands just through performance marketing. So the importance of performance marketing, automation in marketing is also another huge thing that is happening, as we know. I mean, the big 800-pound gorillas are already black boxing their stuff. So, as what UA used to be 3-4 years ago is not going to be the UA. It'll be a lot more, following the machine, mechanical, but automated somewhere else, as opposed to doing the analysis yourself. And the importance of data, as we know, we do a lot of data analysis now. We have been doing it because it's all measurable now, but more into the next phase of predicting where this is going to happen. Based on the data I see today, how quickly, for example, based on what I see the users coming in the last 2 days, can I predict their long-term value? And from a week's time data to 2 days to 1 day, the faster we can predict what is going to happen, how my revenues, who are the users that are really going to, and AI can do this. AI can do this. So these are some of the things I feel.
Okay. Excellent predictions from all the panelists before here. So what I'm going to describe to you about what my predictions are literally with my unique background. So I actually went to law school, and I actually ended up starting a business and sold 2 out of the 3. And one of them was a mobile app. And then from there, I ended up consulting many startups. But I also worked with small startups to mid-stage to all the way to enterprise. So with my stance of 2020 predictions is really understanding that how the startups actually really iterate really quickly because they have a short runway, right? It resonates with some of you out here who are entrepreneurs. You have this 1 year or 1.5 runway. You got to, fulfill your requests with your board members, your investors. So you got to sprint. You're very nimble. You're scrappy. Now, then there's these larger companies. They love what growth hacking is doing in startups, right? So how do you be able to translate from what you're doing from a startup to a larger company, and how larger companies can also, the skill sets, if you're from a corporation and you've never worked in a startup, how you can actually translate to over there. So my predictions is that there's going to be a merge between these 2 types of mentality, that you'll see startup being slowly integrated into a large company. Because today I'm working at Adobe Laboratories, right? It's a large company. I've only been there for 6 months. I'm very fortunate to be able to join a team that actually got acquired by Adobe, okay? But yet there are some of those things you hear about corporate, right? Like a lot of caps. Like you have to get approval from this. There's a lot of people you have to work with that are still in corporate mentality. But together, we are making it work. And I see Adobe as being innovative. I'm not here to sell Adobe. What I'm trying to tell you is that the 2020 predictions is like literally understanding how to be nimble and creating this growth engine, right? People say these buzzwords. What is it? So basically, taking the ability of having 2 layers. I always look at growth hacking as like 2 layers. Very simple. First layer is basically about communicating to your end user. B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. Because when I say I'm a growth hacker, what do I specialize in? It's not about an industry, or I'm just specializing in marketing or anything. I specialize in 2 things. And all of you here who are at a growth summit, mobile growth summit, you are looking at learning or actually specializing in 2 things. If you're in the business of making a lot of money and getting a lot of customers, that is it. You're a growth hacker, period. You got to have your eyes on those 2 things. You'll do whatever it takes to get those 2 things, okay? Whether you are an engineer or whether you're a marketer, a product person, that is the prediction of where I see where we're going to go in 2020. There's going to be a merge of people who are on the product team, engineers, who are marketers, designers, think designers, the think schools. And you're like thinking, they're a growth person? Yes. They have to translate all that data into something super simple for people to understand, why are we selling our company, our ship, this direction, okay? So think of the growth engine that way. So that's the first layer, how to communicate to the end user, marketing, you hear performance ads, proposition, branding. The second layer, which is the meat of the whole thing, is the insights and analytics, okay? Do whatever is necessary. If you don't have the tools to purchase, you don't have the budget to purchase all these tools, look at Excel, go back to the basics. I don't even like math, but I'm able to understand which data means what to be able to say, okay, it doesn't mean we're supposed to do this. It's not product market fit. We shouldn't even do this campaign. The customers are saying no. You don't understand why, but you know what? You're serving one thing, addressing the pain of who the customers you're looking at, right? Address that. Don't forget that. I know you're passionate about what you're building, but always remember you're building for the customer. Understand them. Now, the second thing is, I believe, is personalization and utilizing AI to do that. But how do you do that? You hear these buzzwords. Again, I go back to the basics. Look at the historical data, right? Again, I don't like math, but look at what has been going on. Look at all this data. What's going on? You can see a pattern. We all have these instincts in saying, this pattern's not flowing the way I thought it would be. Now, when you start looking at that, you can start predicting things. That's where analytics come in. Forecasting. What should you do in the next month? And then after that. And then when you start doing that, iterating, I'm only here today because I made a lot of mistakes. I was exposed to many startups. I learned on the way. And when you start repeating, just like riding a bicycle, you're able to figure these little holes. And that's another second prediction. A third one, I really love the fact, again, not selling a product here, that I believe that, there's a lot of broken pieces. So, for example, because I am at Adobe, vision, audio, conferencing, and stuff like that, sometimes you feel like you're pulled out of the app or you're pulled out of the platform. So people want to inflow into the app. So when you see you have to do video conferencing, many of you guys go out and do Zoom, Google Meet? Wouldn't it be awesome to be able to just have that plugin and be able to say, I'm going to click on there. The customer doesn't go away from it. It's still in your app and you're able to measure the metric and be able to say, oh, okay, there's another feature I can actually, to build out because they're in our app. So that is my third prediction when I look at 2020. Sorry, it was a little longer than I.
we have an hour. No problem. Plenty of time. Dennis?
I don't have anything left. No, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. Because there's there's already 12 shared, so I'll go with the 13th one. So I see, maybe it's a bit of a bold prediction, but I look at Twitter and Snapchat and I see a reemergence from those two social platforms because I think they've started to figure things out. And especially on the case with Snapchat, they start hiring a lot of smart people from the Valley, especially from Zynga and a couple other gaming companies. So I see them maybe providing solutions that is a lot more UA manager friendly in the coming year. And same thing with the Twitter with the, getting closer with the US elections. I think there's going to be a lot of money pumped into those platforms. And I think they will be able to go out there and hire really good talent. So when you do that, I believe their offerings for our UA managers will get much better. The second is, like Jeet pointed out, I think is almost a disappearance of UA managers. So this was my prediction last year as well, and it didn't happen in 2019. But I'm hoping it doesn't happen. But if there's a UA manager that is listening to us here, or it goes and looks at the video, the UA manager who can only onboard Mopub is not gonna last, right? I don't know if it's gonna happen in 2020, but it is gonna happen. So if you're out there and I'm not being aggressive or offensive to anybody. I'm just saying, you need to kind of improve your skill sets, right? You need to go much deeper to the data because there is now a lot more smarter data available, right? You need to look at your onboarding. You need to look at what's going on with your D1 retention. You need to sit down with your analysts. And I think our current UA managers, whether it's 20, 30% of our, who is left over that cannot do that right now, they need to get on board and improve those skills, whether you go to a college course or whatever it is. I think as this availability to data increases, the requirement from a UA manager will change as well. And the third is I see a lot of emergence on the esports side because Epix is a digital collectibles platform, and our first content verticals on esports. There's a lot of money going into esports right now, and although we may not be that aware of that happening right now, once there's so much money pouring into a vertical, there's usually some sort of a consolidation or an offering in terms of a platform where we can buy installs or we can buy impressions. That has not happened yet. So Facebook didn't crack it yet. Snapchat didn't, Twitter didn't. So there's still these efforts from all these partners where when you see, Facebook Live or streaming or in an esports event or an NFL game, that is only to get these younger eyeballs and being able to sell those impressions. So I think this will get a lot stronger in 2020. So that's the three.
So let me open up to the audience. Are there any questions that we can ask? Go ahead. Good.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. 2020. I don't know if we're behind the times or if this is forward thinking or not, but my engineering team came to, currently our apps have separate, are separate for Android and separate for iOS. And now we're saying, we're behind the times, and we're now looking at unifying to a unified platform. I'm wondering, are you already all doing that already? Have a unified platform? Or do you envision doing it? And do you have any feedback on a unified versus separate platforms?
Yeah, like at Smule, I can talk about Smule and I talk about LinkedIn, right? I don't know quite enough about LinkedIn just yet because I joined 2.5 weeks ago. But at Smule, we started like chipping away. So I think it's kind of representative of Smule being a kind of a startup stage company, right? With a little bit over 200 employees supporting 50 million monthly active users. So like for those smaller companies, of course, this is a bigger investment. Although it sounds pretty sweet, it's like, we can save all these like design, like engineering time so that we can move on to the same platform. But actually because of the OS themselves, right? And because like Apple and Google won't ever be the same company. So it's going to be difficult. There might be places where it's kind of more on the content consumption side, where it's like more fixed frame. In these places, we may be able to migrate some of the technology, but they're each going to have their unique parts of it. For instance, audio, video engine, like these different places where I feel it's going to be hard. And they probably will each want to differentiate their platform even more, right? To have like more selling point. So I think it's a long-term investment, and we could start from the easiest, like lowest hanging fruit to start experimenting, started like picking up things here and there. But I don't think it's going to be like just solved overnight. And so all of a sudden we are in this dream world. Yep.
Certainly not for 2020. One thing I just wanted to add was, I think one strategy is to be at the places that are hot now, instead of planning too long term in ahead. So absolutely in 2020 you have to be in iOS, Android, Amazon. But if there are some other platforms, like if you can do your own, like if you can be on web, you're not sharing that 30%, right? Go on web. If you're a game, if you're, try that out and market it a little bit. The biggest advantage of being on these stores now is that they're doing a lot of marketing for you, right? There is that 30% share that they're taking. They're also giving you some organic, some search ability. But if you open on web and then, do the Google search or other stuff, you can still drive some traffic and build, because right off the bat, you're not paying that 30% share. On a web platform, for example, or Windows, Amazon, be everywhere you can in slight tweaks of the product, and that's a growth strategy.
Yeah. So the question I think was, are we still going to be separate platforms? I think is yes. Yeah.
So just to clarify, we certainly would still have a presence for Android and separate presence for iOS, but I think the idea is to unify as much of the code as possible.
Exactly. So I think
in terms of developing, you mean?
Yeah.
In 2020, in my opinion, there's no way, right? The reason that we cannot unify the code is because there's so many devices on the Android side versus there's only 8 devices that you need to serve on the iOS. Well, on the Android side, if you look at it right now, the devices is not actually shrinking, they're increasing, right? So when you have that problem, I don't see us having some sort of a unified code base unless Google and Apple gets together and sits down on a table, which I don't see happening at all. So like just process of elimination and what needs to happen in terms of having one code base, I don't see it happening, but I hope it does, right? Because we are trying to build with a small startup of 10, 11 people. We're both trying to build on iOS, Android, and on web. I hope there was one unified code base.
Maybe to add, because it's really good related. What we did, we are in 10 countries, and we had 10 apps per each country, per each platform, so 20 apps, native ones, 3 years ago. 1.5 year took us to migrate this all into the one app, so one iOS, one Android. And in the time we did as well, there's whole refactoring of the code and everything. And that exactly showed us there is no way that we can simplify it. Between iOS and Android developers, which are directly kind of leading by my product management teams, there was so many different ways of programming the particular queries and particular behavior. I do not believe, until Google by Apple or other way around, I do not believe that something like that's going to happen. Or will be very, very surprised. That can be wish for us. We have this progressive web apps and this all instant apps. All other topics are flying around. And even though we tried or like thinking about Huawei or other platforms, you put your app and it's kind of like Android development, we realized it's still a lot of to change and do. So I would say, depending on the business model, I'm not sure which kind of industry you are in, and then find a way, which kind of like platform is it, native on the stores or kind of instant app or other way, and keep it. But really, really evaluate pros and cons, because when we migrated, we as well checked, okay, makes sense, maybe don't do the native apps because it's the most effort on the development. But we had over 50 or 60K reviews per each country, and we would lose it in this case. So for us, was it like not worth to do this? So putting these all dots together, it's kind of like, okay, really pro and cons and checking. But I think even though if it's the same code will be available in some point, possible, it's still the question if it's always worth.
Thank you. Was there another question? Why don't you go for it? Yeah, you.
So this is probably kind of double tapping pretty quickly into one segment of mobile, but so my company Swoop recently did a re-platforming of our mobile app, and we added native mobile push notifications. And I feel like in general, consumers have maybe got some cognitive dissonance or have become a bit desensitized to push in general. So I'm curious to get each of your perspectives about what role you see push playing in 2020.
Should I? Yeah. To be honest, 3 weeks ago we launched web push additionally to normal push, and then come the message that Google Chrome will block it from automatically. Probably most of you heard about it as well. So that's what is my opinion. It's one of the option channel you could have or should have or try it out, but I would really if you have it natively, take the providers or one provider that gives you the possibility to testing and without 1 year of development, depending how hard is the code or how is it developed. Because sometimes my really users from our experience, our testing really don't have no idea, even sorry to say that to my husband, he is not in the online industry. He gets really angry because he don't know how to switch it off, how to use it. People really who are not in the industry knowing it. And I think that's what exactly Google understood as well and trying to avoid. So it's another hassle for us from marketing to find the ways. But I think, so in my opinion, there will be more and more challenges for 2020 coming up for the pushes. And this train is kind of gone already. It's like one additional channel or the way of getting of the users, and everyone's use it because there is so many creative other options. But I think, it's not, gonna be so. It will be harder than easier.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. So just, kind of tying that into, my comments about current UA managers and what they do, right? And I think that, let's say, with a UA manager with a limited knowledge, it's setting up a push notification is welcome push notification, right? But I think we need to go beyond that. And when you do, then you don't get banned. Things are much more effective. You can, maybe activate a paid user or, logging in after a long time. But I think what's been happening with these push notifications and other means of retargeting, if you will, is that, we do like this umbrella package of engagement and the results are not good, right? From the platform side, when they see this data, they go, I'm going to ban half of these guys, right? I don't want these SDKs anymore. Right? So functioning the way that they've been functioning. So I think we need to do a lot of learning on our side. And I don't think it's going to happen in 2020, to be honest with you. We need to find out when is it right time to actually send a push notification to a user. There needs to be an emotional attachment, right? It's just because, why are you opening things when your, mother or father or somebody that you likes things on Facebook versus some random push notification? Because there's an emotional attachment to that alert. So it is the exact same thing, whether you're a paid app or a non-paid app, gaming app, whatever you are. Then you need the UA managers, in my opinion, or the growth managers, needs to find that emotional attachment, and then they have to have their metrics of moments to engage based on that knowledge. But I think right now there's too much stuff going on in terms of push notifications. You logged in once, that's great. Oh, you haven't logged in 4 hours, you came back, there's another push notification. But it is just all over the place, in my opinion, right?
Okay, can I understand more of your situation right now? You're saying it's more there. Is it a drop off going on right now? You're trying to find the middle ground of what is the right amount of push notifications for your app right now, right? Or did you do what did you learn from it? I just want one more extra context.
Sure. So previously, we didn't have any native mobile push. It was purely SMS notifications. Mm-hmm. And, we saw relatively low user engagement via SMS. It wasn't, native mobile push. You can do deep linking, drop user directly into your application. That's immediate DAUs.
So you have analytics on there right now. Is there any shift of like increased engagement because of the push notifications you have? So what your question is really how much more push notifications you should add more without like making them drop. Is that correct?
Or just more broadly, what do you all view as the general industry trends for mobile push?
Okay, the first thing is industry trend is awesome to refer to like how they did it and what is their failures and what works for them. Now, your business has specific customers, right? You need to know what they enjoy. So if yours is more of a utility app, are you serving what they're doing, right? If it's more of engagement, fun, play, or something like that, what makes them tick? So you have to look at your data, understand, okay, well, you keep on pushing more. I'm just giving you a generic one. I'm not telling you to do this. And then you're like, oh, there's a drop. Maybe it's a one-off. Okay, looking at the data actually helps you understand where you're like, oh, let's scale back a little bit. Then constantly give one of your super users, they are invested in this. Ask them questions. They will tell you. Then do you have any feedback forms or feedback in a way that they can tell you, like people who complain, they're the best because they can tell you what's going on. But if there's just one complaint, what is it? It's just one person who likes to complain a lot. You have to figure that out as well. So yes, there's industry trends and all that stuff, but that's taking the average. You're not average. Always think that, right? So when you look at that, you're like, okay, this is what it is. It's good to have a baseline, but I think you should look at your customers, understand their persona, understand what their life is like. Create a persona thing, like going back to the basics with branding, marketing. Like, how does this person live? Why are they on your app? Why are they constantly going on every day? Or is there a certain day that they always come on? That can tell you a lot. And another thing I learned is that even when you have that app and they tell you this is what they want, like feedback, just because they tell you, they're actually behaving differently. So see the discrepancy. That's going to help you with the push notifications. That's the only advice I would give to you.
A bit of both. I agree with what Carol says. It's one solid aspect of what you understanding your people. But I also believe that you need to keep an eye on what your competition is doing and be also influenced by the best in class. To look at you have App Annie, right? Look at the top 100 grossing games or apps. Download a few. Download the top 10 and how often are they sending you can find a ton of information by just playing some of these apps. Now gaming has always been a little bit of advanced in this way, like in terms of, and so some of the things that are going on or what I think people should do more is tie it with the relevance. Like if you're having a big mini game or a mini feature release in your app, try to bring back some of these people, for the relevant people. So there has to be a complete understanding, as you said, the data of your segments, your segments, and then who are the relevant segments. So your tool should be able to segment push notifications, so like personalize a little bit more to the relevant audience with the relevant things that you're doing in your app. So a bit of both best practices as well as if rich text is something that your competition is doing, bring all that fun stuff. Make push notifications great again. I know, bad one. But seriously, push notification is like one of the worst. It's facing a lot of challenges. People are opting out of it, and even the people that are in, they hate push notifications, as Dennis was saying. And how can we make it more relevant, right? One thing in gaming that people do is they're called live operations or live events. So today we'll run this event and just send it around that, and everything from retargeting or your email or push notifications to tie in, like right from the imagery to the messaging, and tie into the exact segments and give them what they want and talk to them about that live event that is happening. It's way more relevant than just sending random push notifications. So increase that relevance and the context for your segments.
Right. And I have another point to add over here is that if you just started like building mobile push notifications, you'll need to know that it's actually a kind of you need to invest a lot more resources in the future to get to the high bar that users are already used to today, right? It's not that they don't like push notifications. They like the ones that are relevant, personalized, all these, right? And they're kind of like pretty spoiled by all the apps that have like huge investment that can actually do that. So then they will hate the not so relevant push notifications even more. And I would say on the early stage, stage, it may take a lot of tests for you to get it right. So of course, like for different categories of applications, like the importance of push notification for you, like maybe more or less. I guess you can decide that on your own and kind of figure out where you are, right? As for whether I should invest more in my actual like other parts of the app experience, or do I invest more in the push notification? And if you truly want to personalize it to a certain level, it takes a lot of investment. And also the other thing is that you need a lot of historical data to kind of train your data to be like getting to that level. So another idea that you could try out is that if your volume isn't high just yet, then you can try to use another vendor service. Obviously, we don't have anyone to vote for here, but but you can try some vendors so that you can use their platforms to start tuning your strategy. And when your volume grows really big, then you can see whether it's still an affordable solution for you, or that you actually migrate off to your own platform. But maybe it's a way to help you like jumpstart to get to a place where you're at least at 80% satisfied faster.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Another elephant in the room is privacy, right? So we all know that consumers are very vigilant these days. It started with ad blockers. Google has already come with a ticking bomb of 2 years. So while it's great for the user and perfectly should do it, but as a marketer, right? How do you now really look at this? There was an article a couple of days back where even the IDFAs by Apple may get deprecated. So great for the consumer, but as a marketer, I'm like somewhere daggling between. How do I draw?
Why do you think it's great for the consumer? Wouldn't, if you're interested in something, wouldn't you want to be marketed that sometimes?
I think somewhere it crossed the line where from contextual it became creepy.
Yeah.
So, right.
True.
As a consumer, yes, but as a marketer, I am now. How do I draw this balance? Is that not interesting? Like prediction of 2020, and any idea of how somebody can come over this?
Sure. I can give it a crack, and then I know you had security in your prediction as well, data privacy as well. Listen, I mean, this is a growing challenge, growing pain. Just like you said, right? People think it's really creepy. They have my data. What's going on? But some of this is, there are no faces to the data, right? Some of this data is even aggregated by marketers to target and bring you relevant products that you're looking for. So the Facebooks and the Googles of the world are using it very, very smartly to make a lot of these publishers money, and marketers are very happy with it. So, but there will be a lot of challenges, and the GDPR, CCPA, these things are not just ticking bombs; they are bombs. I mean, they have been dropped on us, but we have to navigate. We have to comply. There is no, we have to comply smartly. I know how in games and other apps they have a very text heavy. For example, I'm just being concrete here, right? Make your in-apps that announce the permissions or the gateways to that smoother, less friction, if you will. But you have to comply. You still have to find ways to do that. I mean, obviously, if IDFA is deprecated, that would be a very bad day, sad day for many marketers. But something else will come up. We have to hack, right? That's why we are here. We have to find ways. We have to comply, and we have to find ways. And I'm sure we can, and we will.
Yeah, we will. So, like looking back a little bit, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that regulation comes in. Because if we look at kind of including the giant or like huge ones, internet, of course, including LinkedIn and many others, right? A lot of those companies, or I would say especially maybe Facebook, kind of a lot of the growth were because there was like limited regulation. So kind of there was a black hole in there. So like people don't quite know what they're signing up for. And these companies actually took, all these companies, including like all of us, may have like taken some advantage of it and just like grew to a high point. But that is also adding a lot of like difficulty for everyone, is that maybe, and at this point, I think it's good that the days where you can simply trick people into a subscription and let them forget that they actually sign up for it, that is going to happen like less and less, right? And if you uninstalled your app, for instance, in iOS 13, they will remind you as okay, do you have an active subscription? Do you actually want to cancel it, right? So I think it just forces all of us to think back about ways where we can, first of all, like be responsible to all the users. So essentially all the compliance, the goal is not to have compliance. The goal is to actually be transparent and honest with their users so that they understand where their data is going, and also that they have control of their data if they don't want to share for a particular thing. So I think understanding these basics, and if for your company you have like extra bandwidth for this, like hopefully you can also get an in-house like legal person who's like familiar with the product technology, who can actually like discuss with all your product folks and marketing folks earlier, so that everyone is aware about, okay, there might be risk to the users here and there might be risk to the companies here and there. And at least at Smule, after we brought in our chief legal officer, right? So we actually learned a lot of new things, and we also realized that by actually having all these like concepts in mind, actually we did not only end up like being able to develop like faster, more transparent, and our customer satisfaction actually improved afterwards as well. So I think being able to have these kind of like realization or perhaps some like in-house support is definitely going to help the business with that.
Yeah, so just to add, from a smaller startup perspective, so I worked in a much bigger company, 65 people on my team, total of 550 people, 30 million top line business. But from a startup point of view, where I currently am, I think from a marketing perspective, you asked, there's a lot of things that you can look at as a glass half full, right? Because, this GDPR and all these other regulations, they're actually limiting you about 70-80% on resharing your data, not collecting your data. So you can actually learn a lot about your users without breaking anything, without breaking any kind of regulations. So, I'm giving this answer just because you said from a marketing perspective, right? The problem becomes if you have a Facebook SDK or other SDKs that you work with, and then you share this data with them. That is becoming problematic, right? Because there's a lot of competition between big, tech giants, if you will. So this is where all this problem is starting from. Plus, EU now is coming with their own version, the GDPR, and they want to make some money, tax people, all that stuff. So from a marketing perspective, if we look at it from that way, I think you shouldn't be that discouraged, or you shouldn't be looking at it glass, half empty. In my opinion, it's glass half full. And then, if you're sharing obviously with other platforms, let's make sure that you let your customers know. But that shouldn't limit you anything on what your customers are doing, what are the points that you can engage them. And I want to tie this with the push notification question as well. So, for example, we do a lot of things around user engage, resource fluctuation, whether it's a push notification targeting. And what I mean by that is, my background is in gaming. So I've been in gaming for about 13 years. When you target any user based on something they have started and completed versus they don't even know what the hell you're pushing notification for. Obviously the first one works much better. So GDPR or whatever regulation, it doesn't limit any of this. So you need to sit down in front of your computer with your analyst, if you have one, and then basically look at data. And, whether you decide to share that data with Facebook via, custom audiences or whatever the case may be, make sure that it's in your TSA, and then you go from there.
I would maybe add shortly that.
Oh, sorry about that.
Only add shortly. So for marketers, for me means of course more, or for product for us as well, a lot of more terms and conditions, adding every partner, every elements to the visibility to the users. But I would say for marketers mainly, make sure that you don't kind of disturb the user. So analyze if it's on the dashboard or even having interviews with them, like we're partly doing, and that shows you kind of like that they get affected, that they're getting wrong particular push messages and so on, because that's what helps you in long term to really, they will say okay for any cookies disclaimer, anything else if they don't disturb too often and with bad messages. So that's the right job for marketers.
Mine was a little bit related about security and privacy and trust and safety becoming household type topics that people are talking about. You asked really specifically about marketing. When I think about, I'm going to zoom in on mobile engagement, right? So all things post-install. When we think about these challenges that we're responding to, all of our companies are responding to, my question is, do you have some key takeaways or key learnings that you came across when you saw the shift happening across general consumers? I'm going to give an example. For us, it was like we can anonymize data, our user data, and not have to have PII on every single person to understand how they're behaving or what they like or what they don't like, to understand how people react to push notifications or in-app messages. We don't need to have PII on 60 million users, right? So I'm wondering if you have some kind of key learnings that came across your teams in any aspect, in legal, product, user data collection, marketing data collection, that showed up or surfaced as like key takeaways when you had to start thinking about reacting to the shift?
Yeah, so for us, I think I'll give some examples from Topps. I work for this huge digital collectibles and physical collectibles company out of New York. And we had, 4 lawyers in staff, I believe. And everything was a big deal, right? Me replying to some, and me coming from a startup perspective, although I worked at Zynga and Machine Zone, you still ran those, verticals or my teams with a startup mentality. So, there's a reason why there are no lawyers in almost any startups in the Valley, right? Nobody cares. But, going from that to New York, and I'm sorry if there are any lawyers here, I'm not offending anybody. Yeah, so look, from a gaming perspective.
They're leaving now.
Yeah, sorry, nobody cares. Bye. Refer to my first comment. So sorry. But gosh, the thing is, what we learned is, we basically, over years, when you take on a product or, if you haven't started from scratch, there are a lot of things that you implement in SDK-wise, API calls, server-to-server calls. I learned that we had to do a through examination of what we have, right? And then basically ping those customers back or the providers back and say, are you GDPR compliant? So if you don't do this and assume that they are, there's a huge mistake. I think we learned it in the hard way with Topps, with a couple of our providers. But I think, at the end, like I mentioned, in my previous answer, once you realize most of the people that you share your data with, they need to be compliant because, if you look at AWS, if they're not compliant, who will be? That's Amazon, right? I understand that we have to be compliant as a collector of data, but we store our data on, most of the companies here on AWS or Microsoft, right? So, know those nuances and know when you need to freak out or not, and then go seek legal advice, obviously.
Right. I think there were a lot of interesting things that we learned. And when we first started addressing, maybe similar to a lot of you sitting here, we got a 70-page of things that we needed to do for GDPR. Yeah. So, and we weren't that big of a company, and that was when I was at Smule. So actually, I think one thing that has changed that we kind of learned is that things started evolving and a lot of things became more clear. So at least you know what to do. At first, we literally didn't quite know what to do. But I think one of the good approaches that we took back then is that we evaluated both the requirements and also our business in terms of our size and what are our actually biggest risks, and being able to prioritize it and also lay out a roadmap where we want to conquer different things at different times. First, because a lot of things are not clear, and second, because we're a company that's still striving for profitable growth, right? So there's got to be a capacity and a roadmap. And also the other benefit there is that as the big companies start setting the standards, then it's easier for smaller companies to actually follow over there. And the second thing is the one point I just mentioned is that it's actually much easier after you do all these house cleaning, right? Which I think most of the companies actually did, is that starting to involve the folks on the legal side actually earlier on when you're actually doing product design and all these things, right? Don't design it halfway and finally find out, it's actually not legal, not compliant or something. So being able to have those conversations early on is going to help save a lot of cycles afterwards. And it's also going to just put the general awareness to every department in the organization, including product design, marketing, development. So everyone is aware of it. So if there's something going wrong, people can realize it and try to work on it immediately.